Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live stream. Today's session is about working together anywhere, and it's all about how we prepare for a future of what we call blended work. So we'll look at some of the leadership challenges of this COVID-19 world and look at what the world might look like beyond all of this, how we really balance work-life balance in the future, the role of offices. So some of the biggest questions that every company is currently struggling with and trying to answer. And to do this, I'm very happy to say I'm joined by Nicola Downing, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Ricoh Europe, and you are a member of the board there. So how are you?
Hi, yes, good. Thank you, Bernard, for having me on.
Very good. Maybe to give people a little sense of who you are, who Ricoh is, maybe you can give us a little overview of what you do and a little snapshot of the company as well.
Yes, sure, yes. Hi, everybody. So Ricoh is a global technology company, particularly providing office solutions. So the topic that Bernard mentioned today is obviously very relevant for us as to how the office is going to look in the future. We're based globally in lots of different countries. We have 100,000 employees globally and about $15 billion of revenue. So a fair-sized company, and we're market leader in the office automation space. So you can see one of our products behind me as we speak. That said, we're very much moving to be a digital services company, moving away from print, really recognising that printing is in decline, albeit slowly, and that clearly the pandemic has a big impact on that transition and our need to move much more quickly. So that's a bit about Ricoh, a bit about me. So I've been at Ricoh for 15 years in a variety of different roles. Prior to the COO job, I was the CFO, so I've covered kind of the full spectrum of our business. Today, I have responsibility for our 23 operating companies across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So that's really dealing with everything that touches our customers, from sales, marketing, our supply chain and logistics, and how we run our operations in Europe.
Very good. Thank you so much. I just want to say hello to a few people who are saying hello to us. Let me just pull a few people in. We have Tatiana from Sweden. Hey, we're saying hello back. We have Live from St. Louis. We have someone from Kazakhstan. We have Rachel from Texas saying hello. We have someone from Thailand and India. We have Jill from Lincolnshire in the UK, which is nice. We have Jürgen from Belgium, Mustafa from Iraq, Mariana from Argentina. So literally,
very global audience.
Yes, I'm just looking through the stream: Pakistan, Dubai, Ukraine, Texas, Arkansas. Great to see you here, all of you. So let's go and what I always want to make clear is, if you're listening live to this, feel free to drop in any questions that you have for Nicola. If there's anything you want to know more, any burning questions around the future of the office, the future of work, just let us know. So if we go into the content in a bit more in detail, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges for leaders today, given the continued impact of COVID-19 on businesses today?
Well, it's pretty difficult running a business, particularly a multi-country business, from behind a screen, first of all. So I think, it goes without saying that we've still got to deliver results in this time, whether they're the same results we forecast at the beginning of the year or not. There is a degree of commitment that needs to be made. But the first one, I think, is technology, really, making sure that you have the right technology in your organization to facilitate working from home. And particularly in Europe, we were moving from 15,000 people working in lots of different locations to everyone working from home overnight. So the need for that strong level of technology, and ours, actually, the investments we've made over the last few years have really paid off, because we were able to flick that switch pretty quickly. I think the other one that's become much more of a focus is well-being of employees. So whilst staff health and well-being was important before, I think we're much more conscious as leaders of people's, particularly mental health, working from home, whether that's a positive or a negative for people, and really recognising the need, I think, as leaders, to be much more visible than we've ever been. We can't rely on being physically present anymore, so it's a much more scheduled visibility, and making sure that your communication model is really good. And as an example, we used to do monthly town halls for our people across Europe. We've moved those to every other week, because we just feel that rhythm and need to connect is even greater. And I think on that communication side, particularly thinking about your style as a leader, gone are the days where I think you can just broadcast and cascade information and assume everyone's listening. It needs to be a much more interactive and authentic way of working. And we've found particularly useful that people can ask live questions when we're speaking to them, and we don't filter them. We answer them all, and we answer them truthfully. And I think that authenticity is really important, because certainly in our business, there's been some difficult messages to give over the last few months, and I think there will be coming forward as well. So it's really balancing that truthfulness with keeping a bit positivity as well.
So how do you do this in your own leadership role? How do you create this authentic self?
I think it's important to be quite open about what you're doing and how you're feeling as a leader. Certainly I've talked, and other of our board members have talked about what the pandemic has meant to them, what they're doing at home, what their setup is at home, and what frustrations have occurred. And I think, even some things that kind of go wrong on some of the broadcasts that we're doing. I had my 17-year-old son wander behind me one day and kind of wave, not knowing I was on to 15,000 people. But actually, I think that's real. It's what everyone's going through at the moment. So it's making sure that you don't hide and you're quite open about what is going on. I think the other thing that's really important is making sure that the kind of trust element is there. And that goes both ways. So, making our people feel like we trust that they are still working, even though they're at home, that we don't need them to be present and visible to know that we're managing to output. And if anything, I think acknowledging that at the moment, even though our numbers may not be the best they've ever been, our people are probably working the hardest they've ever worked, at home, probably 7 or 8 hours behind a screen. And being empathetic to that and how difficult it is, and making sure that we constantly talk about well-being and mental health. I did a blog last week really talking about, particularly now we've gone into more lockdowns in Europe, it was easier in the summer because you could go for a walk in daylight in the evening, and really encouraging people to take time out in the daytime to go outside, even if it means working a little bit later in the evening. So I think kind of trying to show that as a leader, you're in touch with the issues that your staff are facing today.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think they're the kind of topics I talk to with other senior executives in businesses. And I think the authenticity is really important. And I think in the past, people almost had the ability to have two different personas, one work persona, one home persona. And I feel that this is disappearing a little, because you're letting people into your house. You might see some other family members in the background, as you just said, and I think this makes people much more real and helps hopefully to develop some of the trust that you were talking about, and empathy.
Yes.
So yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think, the days of having a work persona and a home persona have gone. And even before the pandemic, I don't think it's the pandemic that has really kind of changed that. The behaviours that we're talking about being honest, collaborative, truthful, were kind of needed before. And I think the pandemic has merely heightened the need for those things to come to the fore and for people to be less old-fashioned. But, you know, certainly even when I'm walking around the office, I don't feel the need to not be myself. And typically, you know, have conversations that maybe 10 or 20 years ago you would never have had about, you know, the need to go to the hairdresser, or, you know, you need to leave the office because you've got a little crisis at home you need to deal with, or, you know, everybody's got those issues, and actually being open about them, I think, allows other people to be open too.
So we're now in this situation in lots of countries where we are going back into lockdown, just as we were planning to go back into our offices.
Yes.
So how can leaders best plan for this uncertain future that we're experiencing at the moment?
I think it's really difficult. I've never found forecasting and results management as challenging as now. But I think it's really about being agile. You know, and it's kind of an easy word to use in a large organization. It's quite often difficult to find agility. But the reality is, if we don't, as leaders, encourage change, innovation, different ways of working at the moment, you know, it's going to be quite difficult to survive, quite honestly. You know, to take Ricoh, we have probably about 2/3 of our business in the printing space, where with the sales force who go and talk about putting printing devices in offices. Well, that's a pretty irrelevant conversation when everyone's working from home and offices are closed. So, you know, we did a huge amount of work at the beginning of the pandemic to give our salespeople a different talk track. And we launched a marketing and sales campaign called Work Together Anywhere, where sales were able to talk about thermal imaging, about using apps to manage return to work, about safety in the office, and how we could advise on making sure that the right signage and all of that sort of thing is available. So it's kind of needing to pivot your business quite quickly, and also doing that in a large workforce, you know. And I think one of the things that's been really positive out of the pandemic is the kind of loyalty that we've seen to Ricoh, you know, with staff really wanting to go the extra mile, wanting to try new things, being open to doing things differently, knowing that, you know, everyone wants the company to come through and be successful again in the future.
And I guess you must have had lots of conversations as a board and across the business about the future of the office, because if your business is supplying the office with technology, and the office, will there be an office in the future? If so, what are the benefits of an office? What do you see there? What's your vision of the future office space? And will we go to a more hybrid model? What do you think will happen?
I think certainly this latest lockdown has shown that the office is far from redundant. I think the days, though, of everyone commuting into a large city 5 days a week and sitting in an office just to talk on video all day are long gone. And I think we all as leaders need to acknowledge that there is going to be that shift to a far more blended way of working, you know, whatever kind of ratio of days in the office, 3-2 or whatever. But I think one thing that I think everybody's noticed is the need for social connection and human interaction. You know, there is a huge amount of loneliness and disconnection and misalignment that goes on when everyone's working from home. And we certainly see a future for the office, for sure, but probably in a very different way, where people are using the office more as a collaboration hub, a need to come together in a central point to either work as a team or to work on a common project, you know, not just to video people in other countries. You know, and I think the other thing that employers have really got to embrace quickly, if they haven't already, is the need to offer flexibility, you know, and not be rigid in either times of work or locations of work. And that trust point kind of comes back again. It's really, really important that we trust people to work, that they've got a common shared purpose that they're doing this for. So kind of creating that culture is also really, really important in this time. So I think the office will definitely survive. I'm sure there'll be a lot of office space on the market because people will want to downsize because they don't need as much for everyday use. But I think certainly maybe it will look different, it will look snazzier, so that people are attracted to come in and use it as a collaboration zone more.
Yeah, and I think in the future people will need to have a very good reason to travel to the office, I think, and hopefully more people will have a home working environment that is better, where they can do things like print and have good networks and security and privacy and all the things that we need. But I completely agree. I have lots of colleagues and friends who really miss the social element of all of this.
I think the other bit as well is kind of a one size fits all isn't going to work going forward. You know, assuming that everybody has those facilities at home. You know, we've got a very diverse workforce in terms of location, nationality, age, etc. You know, and some of the people have kind of said to us, look, I can't work from home 5 days a week. I'm in a small, you know, flat share or something like that. I need to come to the office for my own sanity. You know, so I think there's people like that, and then there's others who are incredibly scared about leaving home and are worried about the virus. You know, and it's kind of managing to all of those different needs, making sure the office is safe and you can socially distance and feel comfortable in the office, but also providing a space to those people who really feel that they want to get out of their home environment.
So what do you think leaders can do to ensure productivity and well-being of their employees? Their well-being is something you've touched on already that you think is really important. What everyone I speak to, every business leader at the moment says that actually for the vast majority of them, productivity has actually gone up. People are doing a great job working from home, but well-being and mental health is definitely a challenge. So how do we take this forward? How do we create this balance and still drive the business forward?
I think it's again that balanced messaging between the business performance, the results that we're all striving for, but also acknowledging that those issues are occurring. And you know, I think being honest about Ricoh, I think, you know, we've moved over probably a decade from a very macho culture to a much more inclusive, diverse culture where everyone can be themselves. You know, and actually, even 5 years ago, talking about mental health and people acknowledging they're having mental health challenges would have been a real taboo. So I think, you know, the pandemic's done a positive actually there to take that off the table as a taboo. You know, but I think it's all very well talking about it, and it is really important to talk about it. And I think senior people need to acknowledge that they're struggling too, if they are, and not kind of have this facade going on. But you do also need to kind of have some tools that I think you offer your people that show that you are committed to mental health. Yeah, and one thing we've done is offered a 24/7 GP service to people during the pandemic, and we're going to continue that afterwards because it's worked really well. The staff feedback's been brilliant, that they struggle to get an appointment with their doctor, but, you know, within a couple of hours you can have a video with a doctor, and if needs be you can physically go and see a doctor. You know, we've got Headspace that's available to all of our employees, the mindfulness app. You know, and I've talked quite openly to our staff about the fact that I've used that it's certainly helped me where I felt a little overwhelmed, and actually, you know, using tools like that to help calm down and feel more peaceful is good. And we've also got an employee assistance program which offers counselling either over the telephone or video at the moment, or face-to-face when that's available. You know, and that deals with all manner of issues, from, you know, financial issues, anxiety, you know, work stress, you know, whatever's going on in a confidential way. So I think it's really important that leaders acknowledge the issue and acknowledge that not everybody is comfortable at home. Yeah, but it also gives some actual practical tools, if you can afford it in your budgets, to try and help.
Yeah, and you touched on culture there. So this is always one of my questions. What is the role of company culture in a post-coronavirus world? If we carry on working from home much more, I guess it would be much more difficult to somehow build the right organizational culture. I think in the past, companies created culture, especially through physical office space and things like this, and this will become less relevant and less important. So will company culture play an equally important role in the future? And how do you build and maintain a company culture?
Yeah, it's a good question. My view is that I think company culture will be more important than ever. I think, if people are less present in offices, they need to feel connected to something and they need to understand the purpose of what they're doing. So I think creating that company culture is going to be more important, firstly, and then how to do it. I think you're 100% right. It's going to be much harder to do that when we are behind a screen. It is much easier when you've got a nice office that's fitted out and is pleasant to work in, and you see lots of other people. But I think it's kind of prevalent on leaders to be a lot more visible today than they have been. Companies need to show their board. They need to have senior leaders talking, and not just the top couple of people. We try to engage a lot more of our wider team to talk to our staff, on different topics to try and foster that kind of culture. I think having some values definitely will become more and more important. Ricoh's had a core set of values that are really part of an induction process into the company that we do kind of stand and live and die by. And I think seeing those in action is going to be more important than ever. So it's no good saying we're an innovative company. It's like, well, let's see some examples of that. Let's demonstrate that innovation and that inclusivity, or if we've got winning spirit, let's talk about some positive customer wins that we've had. Let's talk about some of the positive things that have happened around the company. And even though maybe sometimes you're delivering a difficult or a negative message, there are always positives. And we've had loads of things like volunteering. We've had our 3D printing devices turned into printing visors for medical, for the NHS. So there's loads of things that are going on in our communities, and we've had a lot of staff on the front lines in hospitals. Our engineers have been in hospitals, have been even busier, obviously, going into COVID wards, and actually getting some of those engineers just to do a little video and talk to people and share that has been incredibly powerful and emotional for us. So I think it's making sure that people see what's going on in your company. Even small things that you may kind of think aren't so important, I think are quite big.
Yeah, interesting. So more challenging, definitely. And then going back to some of the things we discussed earlier, the role of offices, then maybe they will become even more important because they are the spaces where you can really create this company culture. So anyone listening live now, share your views. Do you think office space will become more important in the future or less important? That would be very interesting to hear everyone's opinion. Then moving on then in terms of the impact of the pandemic on things like people's or companies' appetite for digital transformation. What's your sense there? Has this improved the appetite for digital transformation, and where do you see some of the biggest investments taking place?
Yeah, I think it kind of varies at different scales of businesses. I think, large corporates were pretty well set up. Were able to move to online working via Teams or whatever platform they chose, having made that investment. Where I think maybe it's been the biggest challenge is in the small and medium end of the market, where perhaps that level of investment hadn't happened. They haven't got the same resources to be able to move as quickly. But we're seeing a huge appetite for transformation, I think, across all of our customer channels. Certain things like getting back to the office, sounds quite basic, but unless you've got some sort of app that manages, how many people are coming in on that day, what desk they're sitting at, did they check in, did they get COVID, do you need to close the office, who do you need to tell? We've developed an app that we're selling at the moment to our customers, and they're embracing that because they know they need it, and it's kind of almost become non-optional now. I think certainly from our perspective, even though times may be tougher than we had hoped this year, we're still investing probably even more heavily in our future. The part of our business that's services, office services, we're in the middle of putting a new ERP platform in there. And anyone that's ever done that knows they are difficult and expensive typically, and this is probably no different. So we haven't stopped that investment. We think it's even more important to have that going on. But again, it's all about prioritizing of resources, I think. So everybody knows they need to transform digitally. But there needs to be a purpose to doing that. Is there getting people back to work, the purpose? Is it making sure people don't have to be in the office, the purpose? And spending your resources wisely.
Very good. I'm just looking through the stream to see what people have said, and Sanvi is saying less important. I think office space will become less important. Others say, like Mark saying, would be more important, but will be delivering a more refined role. I think it's absolutely the case. And then Nicola is saying office space will be different, more flexible, and absolutely. And I think some of this transition has already taken place over the last few years. We have seen office spaces completely changing already, and this will just carry on.
Yeah, the one thing that's been quite interesting is whether people want to have open plan, and that's definitely been the move over the last few years. And certainly when we've been helping our customers with office planning and all that sort of thing, it's been to dismantle offices. And now some of the requests are actually to put barriers back up, whether they're perspex screens or, distance between people sitting next to each other. So it's definitely going to be different. There's going to be less people in the same amount of space for sure, because social distancing, I think, is going to be going on for quite some time. And it's making sure that you've got the right signage, the right processes, and some sort of app to be able to book in, know where you're sitting, know that it's been cleaned, and it's going to be cleaned again before someone else comes in tomorrow. So I think there's not going to be this kind of flood of people 5 days a week back into London or any other big city, but a balanced approach.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Conrad was just saying here that culture is a mindset and purpose. You don't need office space to create it, and it comes from good leadership and leaders that lead. Anyone on the live stream now, if you have any specific questions for Nicola, you have the chance to ask someone that actually runs a big organization that is going through all of those challenges that everyone is facing at the moment. So let me know. I guess when we look at the impact of the pandemic, there also have been some positives. So getting the balance right between home working and travel, this is definitely something that I have massively benefited from. I used to spend so many hours on planes flying to different places, and now you look back and you think this was crazy, and not only crazy, but also really bad for the environment. So there has been a positive impact on the planet. So what role do leaders play in ensuring sustainability actually remains firmly back on the boardroom agenda in the future?
Our view certainly at Ricoh is that if you haven't got sustainability very high up your agenda, you probably won't be around in 10 years, and probably neither will the planet if we carry on like we are, sadly. So I think large corporates in particular have a massive part to play. They're often the reason that we are suffering from a sustainability and an environmental perspective. So making sure that we behave in sensible and responsible ways is really important. I think not only because it's the right thing to do and leaders have an obligation to do that, but it also it helps from a profits and a customer retention perspective. I don't think we see a tender these days that doesn't ask us about our environmental commitments, and if you can't say that you do more than talk about the UN sustainability goals, or, you know, you've joined the Renewable Energy 100 or something like that. You know, you really need to be able to show that you're doing these things, and that's what we try to do. You know, the other aspect is, I think staff care about the environment, and everybody should care about the environment. So I don't think you'll attract the best talent and retain the best talent if your company doesn't care about the future of the planet. You know, so yeah, I think it's got to be high up there, and there has got to be this balance between profit and environmental sustainability.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Leo Cardio is asking a question here. He is saying or asking that whether the election of Joe Biden actually will make the world a better place and maybe create a better scenario to help us get through this. What's your reaction there?
Well, my view as a private citizen is I was delighted over the weekend that Joe Biden won. I think the fact that he's already said he will be undoing a lot of the Trump policies and putting things like climate change back on the agenda, joining the climate accord, you know, being a better member of NATO, all of those things. I think, yeah, he has a much more outward-looking view of the world than President Trump had. You know, he was much more about protectionism in his home country. You know, so my view is that, yes, because America is such a big voice on the global stage, I think having America behind anything is useful. And I think having Joe Biden in those kinds of conversations is only going to be a positive. You know, that said, it all depends on your politics, because 70 million people voted over the weekend for Mr. Trump and 75 million voted for Joe Biden. So, you know, the 70 million are probably disagreeing violently with what I'm saying at the moment, but that's my view anyway.
Very good. Yeah, I share that view. I think for the world as a whole and our ability to tackle the crisis, this can only be a good thing. Helen is asking a question about the role of 5G and whether 5G will be important in transitioning to this blended work environment and making future work patterns more successful. Have you got any views on that?
I think any progress in technology and improvements in connectivity only make all of the things that we've been talking about today easier. So yes. But I don't think any company could use kind of the excuse of I'm waiting for 5G to actually get on and connect your people and allow them to work from home like we're doing today, you know, because it's perfectly possible today with 3G, 4G, whatever you get at home. So, you know, I think, yes, of course it will, and it will make communication much more flexible in the longer term. But don't use it as an excuse to wait, because we do need to be doing these things now with the technology that we've got.
I agree. And Latif is asking whether we need to restrain ourselves a bit more when we go back to the office in terms of socializing, privacy, communication, and so on. That's a point. What do you think?
I'm not sure, because, you know, humans at the end of the day, and certainly I've spent some time in the office over the summer, and it's just been so mood lifting to see people, and I hadn't forgotten how to talk to people and how to socialize. I think the one bit that maybe we do need to learn is the social distancing side of it. You know, that is quite easy to forget when you're having a normal conversation. You just kind of move too close, or, you know, you're looking at the same document or the same piece of kit or whatever, you know, so those things we probably have to retrain on, you know, kind of the physical boundaries in the office. But I think in terms of socializing and human interaction, I think we've seen, certainly in our office, that's kind of come back within a blink of an eye, really. And if anything, people are quite excited to be in the office, and you know, I think we mustn't underestimate how much people have workplace friends. You know, and you know, even though maybe you don't think you've got your best friend at work, you've got some really good friends. You spend quite a lot of time there, or you used to. and actually seeing them and having an anecdotal, unscripted conversation is really, really helpful. So I think the social distancing and the ways of working in the office probably need to be relearnt. How to go and get a coffee and clean the machine afterwards and all that kind of thing that don't come as second nature, but the human side of it, I think, will still be there.
I completely agree. Johan is asking a good question here. He's saying, how do you onboard new employees and introduce them to the company culture and helping them to get to know everyone else when everyone is working from home or in this hybrid world? I think this is a challenge for most organizations. How
it really is, yeah.
Ricoh?
Yeah, no, it is. It is a challenge. I think that's one of the hardest things. That, and probably having young graduates who've just joined as well, and sort of training people who would typically learn by sitting next to somebody and overhearing conversations as much as anything. So I think it's really difficult. This is the hardest bit. I think it just means that your induction programs and your ways of getting people to know each other have to be far more formalized. You can't rely on kind of a half day in a meeting room and then, off you go and say hello to everyone you meet. I think it's going to have to be a much more kind of scheduled introduction to the company, a lot more scheduled meetings with the people that matter. And actually, funny enough, I've just had a very senior exec join, a CEO of one of our businesses about 3 weeks ago. Moved to the UK from South Africa, so was looking for somewhere to live on top of all of the getting to know people at work, and probably for the first time I did a very detailed kind of 3-week diary schedule of these are all the people that you need to meet, and once you've met them once and I've helped you with that, I'm sure you can then take yourself off and do it again, but so it's kind of making the best use really of the tools that we've got, but making sure you're more formalized in the way that you introduce people into the organization. And I think the other thing to then remember is kind of the constant checking in with them, because you haven't got that established network of mates that you can call on and say, God, I've had enough today or whatever, so you kind of have to keep making sure that as the manager of that person or the colleague of that person, you do call them deliberately every day or every couple of days at least to check in how things going, what can we do, and my view would be as soon as it is possible, get them into the office for a day. If we're not in lockdown hard like we are now, if you can get them in, I think, gosh, having a day in the office and taking someone for lunch is the best way of doing it still, actually.
Very true. This is the bit I'm really missing, just going for lunch. I want to go to a really busy restaurant and buzzing place and have a nice lunch with people. Vivek is asking, what have you found important for Ricoh employees in regards to returning to work safely? Any advice there?
Yes, the thing that we've needed to publicise quite a lot is what we've done that's different in the office, from things like thermal imaging cameras to take temperatures when you come in, to even before you get to our floor, what's the safety in the lifts, only 2 people at a time, the lifts are cleaned every half an hour, etc. So I think talking about things that you would have just completely ignored before, like cleaning regimes, checking in, making sure we know exactly who's in the office, what their health is like on the day, and if there's later health issues, telling people and being open. But also we've done some videos, kind of just anecdotally, me or a colleague walking around the office with my phone going, so I've just arrived at reception, this is what we do here now. Our receptionists are behind a Perspex screen. You have to book in, you have to then click the QR code on your desk, so we know who's there and what they were doing. And I think one of the things you have to balance with all of that is making sure people know it is for their safety and well-being, and not because Big Brother wants to know what time you arrived and left the office and how many hours you were sat there. So I think it's, making sure that we haven't moved our desks actually in Ricoh, but we've put stickers on, sit here, do not sit here. and the same in meeting rooms that were previously available for 4 people may only be 1 person now, or 8 people, you can have 2 people in. So again, making sure people see that you're taking it seriously, that their health matters. We've also, I think the majority of our staff actually have taken that really well and have been really positive about the changes that we've made in the office. There are some, though, that are still really reluctant to come back. Public transport has a big part to play in that. But we have tried to encourage, when lockdown wasn't in place, everybody to try and come in 1 day a week, and on a day a week when their teams were also in the office. So there was a purpose to coming in. You could meet your colleagues, you could have a team meeting, you could talk about what was going on. So I think it's, trying to overcome those fears, but listening to those fears as well about, if you have got a concern, is it because you've got an underlying health condition? And if it is, no, please do stay at home. We don't want to put anyone at risk, or their families at risk for that matter. So it's trying to be as encouraging, I think, to get back as much as possible, because there are undoubtedly massive benefits to seeing people physically, but also not forcing the issue and making it as much as possible a degree of choice. And our experience has been probably about 80% of our staff have wanted to come in when they could, at least 1 day a week, if not more.
Very good. So looking into the future then, have you got any predictions? If we look 5 years ahead, how do you envisage the world of work changing, the role of offices changing, the role of technology, culture? So some of the things we started, or we talked about in today's session.
Yeah. Gosh, it's a murky crystal ball at the moment. But I think, in 5 years, I'd like to think we will be out of the risk of COVID-19, that there will be a vaccine available, and that we will, in some degree, be able to go about our normal lives, whatever normal then looks like. I don't think the office will ever go back to what it was. And I think, we've got to acknowledge that. I think it will become this much more a kind of touchdown collaboration space, maybe having smaller offices but more frequently spaced out across geographies, so that people can, pop in for half a day or a day. And I think, one of the real positives is it will absolutely make blended working and work-life balance, I think, the norm. I think any company that insists on its staff being in the office on certain days is just going to be a kind of dinosaur by then. I think as well, sadly, many of the companies that exist today may not exist in 5 years. I think it's incredibly tough in the retail, hospitality, kind of restaurant, bar industries, and those kind of companies don't have big cash stores, and often live month to month, and it's just impossible to see how they can survive, because the government, I don't think in any country across Europe, can afford to support like they are now for the long term. So at some point, everyone's going to come off that drug, whether that's next year or the year after or whenever, and then the debt has got to start being repaid at some point in time. So I think, the world will look quite different in terms of taxation and that kind of thing, and how the debts from COVID are really repaid at that point in time. So I think much more flexibility, which personally I think is a massive positive. I can remember the days in the early part of my career trying to get a 3-day week or, a bit of flexibility, and it was nigh on impossible, and that's not going to be the case anymore. So I think, that will probably also drive quite a lot more diversity in the workplace. I think, women will be able to find it easier to get those kind of more flexible roles, or men indeed who want that kind of flexibility. So I think, whilst there'll be quite a lot of change, probably quite a lot of sadness with some companies not surviving, many people losing their jobs and probably only by then starting to get re-employed, that there will be some positives that come out of this time as well, particularly if leaders try and embrace them and make them happen.
Very good. And that was really our whole conversation I found really refreshing and good, and definitely very authentic. So I thank you very much, Nicola. And
thank you for having me on.
Yes, as always, anyone who wants to re-listen to any of these conversations, you can go to my YouTube channel where you can listen to all my conversations. And every week I have fascinating guests and great conversations. Or you can head to my podcast if you want to listen to this on the go or without a screen. As always, anyone listening live, let us know what you think. If you enjoyed the session, if there are any other questions you want to have an answer to, or if there's anything you want us to discuss in the future. As always, stay safe, everyone. Have a lovely week, and thank you very much for tuning in. And thank you, Nicola.
Thank you.